Zairi was born during a thunderstorm on the edge of a dying world. Her planet, Relentless, was dry, red, and full of wind. The buildings were made of bone and metal, and the people lived by old traditions. But Zairi was not like other children. Her legs were twisted at birth, soft like clay, and she could not stand. The healers tried burning herbs, singing to the stars. And using sharp tools, nothing worked. They called her cursed. "Leave her inside," her grandmother said. "She brings shame," so her mother wrapped her in old cloth, hid her from visitors, and never let her play outside. Zairi spent most of her days lying on a thin mat in a dark room. She could hear the laughter of other children, but never saw them. Sometimes she would crawl to the window just to feel sunlight on her face. She had never touched the ground with her feet. She had never taken a single step, but her mind was strong. She would draw stars on the floor using bits of ash. She would whisper stories to herself about flying people and floating cities. She dreamed of having wings because in her dreams, she didn't need legs. Then came the fire. It started with a scream. A transport ship crashed near the village and the fuel ignited. Flames spread fast, smoke filled the sky, and panic took over. Families grabbed their things and ran. Zairi's mother tried to return for her, but a falling beam blocked the doorway. She shouted for help, but no one listened. No one would risk their life for a cursed child. Zairi coughed in the smoke, her eyes wide, her tiny arms trying to push herself toward the door. She cried, but her voice was weak. The ceiling above her cracked, red dust fell. And just when everything seemed over, someone kicked the door open. A tall human in a fire-resistant suit rushed. In his eyes were sharp and his breath heavy, without a word. He picked her up like she weighed nothing. She looked up at his face, confused. Why would a stranger save her? Why would a human save her? He ran through the fire, shielding her with his body. Ash fell around them like snow when they reached safety. He laid her on the ground and tore off his helmet. His name was Michael, a human doctor sent to the region to help injured civilians. He looked at her legs and frowned. "She's not burned," he said to the medic nearby. "She can't walk." The medic laughed. "That one. She's been broken since birth. Useless." Michael ignored the words. He wrapped her in his coat and took her to his shuttle. Zairi didn't speak, but she watched him closely. No one had ever looked at her the way he did. With focus, like she mattered. He brought her to a small field hospital built inside a metal dome near the hills. The place smelled of medicine and metal. Other doctors didn't want to treat her. "We help injuries, not defects," one alien doctor said. "Send her back. She's taking up space," another whispered. But Michael stood in front of her. Bedin said, "She stays," that night. Zairi stared at the stars through the window of the hospital. Her legs still hurt. Her body was weak. But something inside her had changed. A stranger had walked into fire for her. He didn't know her name, her story, or her curse. But he still came. She looked at her legs and whispered, "Maybe." "I'm not cursed." Michael sat by her bed, showing her his datapad. He played videos of human children with metal legs, walking and running. Zairi's eyes grew wide. She had never imagined such things were possible. He gently touched her arm and said, "We'll try." Zairi didn't answer, but her hands slowly reached for his. And in that moment, something new was born in her heart. A tiny spark of trust. A seed of hope. She didn't know who he really was. She didn't know if her legs could ever work, but she knew one thing. This human, this doctor had seen her. Not as a burden, not as a mistake, but as a girl worth saving. And for the first time in her life, Zairi believed. Maybe she could fly after all. The small hospital smelled like oil and old metal, and its lights flickered every few minutes. It had once been a mining station before war turned it into a medical shelter. Now it was filled with wounded soldiers. Sick children and tired nurses, but among them all, one little alien girl lay silently on a cot near the back wall. Zairi watched the ceiling, her eyes following the shadows as they danced from the broken light above. Her legs didn't move, but her heart beat fast every time the human doctor came near. Michael checked on patients every hour, but he always stopped by her last, not because she was less important, but because he stayed longer with her. He would kneel beside her and talk, even when she didn't answer much. He showed her diagrams of legs, drawings of muscles, and pictures of children who had metal limbs. Zairi listened, though she didn't understand all the words. What she understood was the way he looked at her, like she wasn't a waste of time. Other doctors in the hospital didn't like her presence. "She's not injured. She's defective," one said. "Medical resources are low. She's not a priority," another whispered. Zairi heard them all, even when they thought she couldn't. Her ears were sharp, and their words stabbed more than pain. One night, a nurse passed by and found Michael building something strange at his desk. He had gathered spare parts from old tools and bits of a broken exosuit. He worked through the night, adjusting wires and shaping metal. In the morning, he brought it to Zairi. It looked ugly, too big for her, and scratched, but he smiled proudly. "It's not perfect, but it's a start," he said. Zairi blinked and slowly reached out to touch it. Cold metal under her fingers, heavy and rough, but she didn't pull away. The first time she tried to use it, her arms trembled, her breath came short. Michael held her carefully, guiding the suit around her waist and legs. It lifted her a little, just enough for her toes to brush the floor. Zairi gasped. The feeling was new, terrifying and strange. For a moment, she stood, her weight supported by the suit and Michael's arms. Her legs didn't move, but her body was upright. She didn't fall. She cried, not because of pain, but because she had never felt the world from that height before. Michael gently wiped her tears, whispering, "That's it, Zairi. That's the first step." They tried again the next day, and the day after that, each time a little better. Each time a little longer. Other patients began to notice. Some smiled when she passed by in her frame. Others whispered, "She's trying," someone said. And that changed everything. Still, not all saw it the same way. An alien officer arrived one morning with sharp eyes and a colder voice. He wore a badge of authority and carried a list. Zairi's name was not on it. "This girl isn't approved for long-term care," he said. "She has no guardian, no identity record. She must leave." Michael stood in front of him, silent at first. Then he said just one word: "No." The officer didn't argue. He simply gave a warning and left. But the message was clear. Zairi was not welcome here, not officially, that night. Michael didn't speak much. He stared at the stars outside the window, his jaw tight. Zairi watched him, her voice barely a whisper. "Are you leaving me?" Michael turned to her, surprised. "No, never," he said. And the way he said it made her believe him without doubt. She stayed up late, her hands holding a drawing she had made, 2 stick figures under stars, one tall, one small. She gave it to Michael the next morning, and for the first time, he looked like he might cry. He folded the paper carefully and kept it in his coat. Later that day, he began packing only the essentials: medical tools, food, and a small oxygen tank. He didn't tell anyone. But Zairi knew. They were leaving. When night came, the hospital slept. Michael carried her quietly through the back hallway, the mechanical suit hidden in a bag. They reached his shuttle, an old emergency transport, dusty and scratched. Zairi was nervous, her hands clutching the straps tightly. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To a place that won't send you away," he answered, and the engines roared to life. Carrying them into the sky, she looked down at the planet as it faded behind them. The village that cursed her, the hospital that helped her, the place where she was born and almost died. Now she was flying, not in her dreams, not with wings, but with a human who refused to let her fall. The shuttle shook as it left the atmosphere. Old engines rumbling like tired animals, Sci-Fi sat strapped in beside Michael, her hands clutching the edges of her seat. She had never flown before, never even left her village. Now the stars were right outside the window, big and close like eyes, watching her. She didn't speak, and neither did he, but he kept looking at her, making sure she was okay. After some hours, the stars shifted, and a small rocky moon appeared on the screen. It was covered in silver dust and strange towers like broken fingers sticking out of the ground. Michael guided the shuttle down slowly, carefully avoiding the worst of the debris fields. "This moon is safe," he finally said, his voice soft. "I have a friend here, a real doctor. She won't turn you away." Sci-Fi didn't answer, but she gave a slow nod. They landed near a shelter made of patched steel and glowing lights. The air was cold, and the wind howled like ghosts. Michael wrapped a blanket around Sci-Fi before carrying her out into the open. The place was quiet, but not empty. A tall alien woman stepped out from behind a wall, her eyes glowing faint blue. "Michael," she said with a surprised smile. "You look terrible." He laughed tiredly. "I feel worse. We need help." The woman looked at Sci-Fi, her smile fading into something serious. "She's injured." Michael shook his head. "She was born this way. No one helped her. I'm asking you to." The woman's name was Dr. Aisha, a skilled surgeon who had left the main systems after a scandal. She didn't ask too many questions, just led them inside and scanned Sci-Fi carefully. Her hands were steady, her voice kind. "She's weak, but her spine is strong," she said after the scan. With the right support, she could walk. Those words made Sci-Fi sit up straighter, her heart beating fast. Walk. It didn't feel real, but it sounded beautiful. Michael helped her lie down in the new bed, which was softer than any she had ever touched. Aisha brought warm food and clean clothes, and even braided Sci-Fi's hair that night for the first time. Sci-Fi slept without fear of being thrown away. The next day, work began. Aisha started designing a custom support brace using scrap tech and human schematics. Michael worked beside her, despite the pain in his shoulder from carrying Sci-Fi too long. He said nothing about the pain, always pretending it was nothing. But Sci-Fi saw the way his fingers trembled when he tried to lift heavy tools. She wanted to help, but her legs refused to move. So she did what she could. She stayed quiet. She followed instructions, and she practiced lifting her arms. Day by day, her body grew stronger, her arms steadier, her spirit brighter. She smiled more, laughed sometimes, and asked questions about stars and planets. Michael noticed the change. And so did Aisha, this child. Aisha said one night she was thrown away, yet she shines brighter than any flame. Michael replied, because she never gave up, even when no one believed in her. Then came the hard part. The day Aisha brought the first working version of the support brace. It was light but strong, designed to wrap around Sci-Fi's waist and support her legs with tiny motors. Michael helped fit it on her carefully, explaining each part. Sci-Fi said nothing the whole time, her hands gripping the sides of the chair so tight her knuckles turned pale. When it was finally secured, Aisha stepped back and nodded. "Try," she said gently. Just a little. Sci-Fi took a deep breath. Her eyes closed for a moment. She reached for the handles on the side and pulled the brace, gave a soft hum. Her legs moved a little, one step, then another. The room was silent. Michael stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. Tears slowly filled his eyes. Sci-Fi wobbled, but stayed upright. Her knees shook, her breath came quick, but she didn't fall then. She looked up at Michael and whispered, "I'm walking." He rushed forward and wrapped his arms around her, careful not to unbalance her brace. "You did it," he whispered. "You really did it." Sci-Fi cried into his shoulder, her small arms wrapping around him tightly. She had Never felt this proud, this alive, not in her dreams, not even in her hopes. She was walking later that night. She lay awake on her bed, staring at the stars through the small window. Her legs ached, her body tired, but her heart felt like it could fly. She thought of all the people who called her broken, cursed, worthless, and then she thought of one man who said no, who carried her out of fire and into light. She turned to see Michael sleeping in the chair nearby, his arms crossed, head resting against the wall. Zairi smiled softly. In her heart, she didn't just see him as a doctor anymore. He was her light, her wings, her reason to try again and tomorrow. She would take more steps. Series legs felt heavy the next morning, as if they had turned to stone overnight, but she smiled anyway when she saw Michael standing beside her bed with a mug of warm broth. He didn't say much, gave her a nod, and she understood today. She would try again. The brace was already waiting on the small table near the wall, polished and adjusted by Aisha. The doctor had stayed up late, tightening the joints and adding soft padding where it had hurt Zairi's hips. Every little change helped. Every small comfort mattered. When the brace clicked around her waist, Zairi inhaled sharply, bracing herself. Michael gave her a steady hand. Aisha stood behind, quiet, watching every move like a worried parent. Zairi placed her foot forward. Slowly, it shook, but it landed. The next step came a little quicker. She made it across the room before her knees gave out. Falling into Michael's arms, she laughed through her tears. Not because she had fallen, but because she had walked further than ever before. Every step meant something now. Every step was a rebellion against everyone who had ever called her curse. That evening, Aisha received a message from off-world authorities. A new medical commander had taken control of the system, and they were checking patient records. Zairi wasn't on any legal list. She had no ID, no citizenship, no parent registered. Aisha read the message with a tight jaw and quietly turned off the monitor. Michael knew what this meant. They had run before. Now they would have to run again, but this time Zairi had changed. She wasn't a silent, broken child anymore. She was someone who had stood up, someone who had walked still. The world didn't care about her progress. Rules were rules, and outsiders weren't always welcomed, even by those sworn to heal. That night, Zairi sat beside Michael as he wrapped a bandage around his sore shoulder. She noticed how slow his movements were. "You're hurt?" she said softly. Michael chuckled, trying to wave it off. "Just a little old pain." "You shouldn't carry me anymore," she added. Michael paused. "I'll carry you as long as you need," he said. "But I don't want to need it forever," she whispered. He looked at her, surprised by the strength in her voice. She wasn't just growing stronger, she was changing inside. Aisha joined them in the small room, holding a data pad. "There's a transport heading to the Earth's medical colony in 3 days," she said. "I can get her a pass, but only if she has a guardian." Michael didn't hesitate. "Then I'll sign as her guardian." Zairi stared at him, unsure what that meant. "You'd be like my family." "I already am," he answered without blinking. The next few days passed in quiet rush. Aisha prepared her documents. Michael worked on upgrading her brace, adding new stabilizers and lighter frame parts. Zairi practiced each morning and every evening. She walked longer, stumbled less. She even started moving without help for short distances. But on the second night, something changed. A group of bounty enforcers landed without warning. They weren't there for her. They were looking for someone else. But when they saw Zairi, they noticed her unregistered status on local scanners. "Who is she?" one asked sharply. "She's a patient," Michael replied. "She's not in the system." The man growled. "That's because the system failed her." Michael shot back. One of the enforcers stepped forward, reaching for Zairi's arm. Michael stepped in front of her before the hand could touch her. "Don't," he warned. There was a long pause, cold silence between strangers. Finally, the lead officer grunted and turned away. "Keep her out of sight. Next time we might not walk away." They left without more words. But the message was clear. Siri sat in silence that night. Staring at her brace, her hands folded in her lap, Michael sat beside her. Tired but calm. I'm trouble, she said. Quietly, no, he replied. You're worth every bit of this, but they hate me. They don't matter. He said, you matter. She leaned against him, small and shaking. I don't want to go to Earth without you. You won't, he promised. We go together. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and unsure. Will they let someone like me live there? Michael smiled. A gentle, real smile. They'll be lucky to have someone like you. As she drifted to sleep, her fingers curled around his hand. Michael stayed awake. Staring out the window at the stars, he had seen so many things during his time in the galaxy, but nothing ever touched him the way this small alien girl had. She wasn't just walking, she was teaching him how to keep moving. 10. The dark of night. Aisha finished uploading Ziri's story to a protected medical network. She didn't add names, she didn't ask for help, she just shared the video of a girl who had once been forgotten, now learning how to stand, and somewhere across the stars, someone was going to see it. Ziri stood in front of the small mirror, her hands resting on the metal brace wrapped around her waist and legs. The reflection showed more than just her body, it showed someone she barely recognized, not the hidden girl in the dark room back home, but someone taller, someone who stood up. She touched her cheeks. They were fuller now, her skin had color, her eyes were brighter, she was becoming someone new. Michael walked in quietly, holding a folded shirt. Your travel clothes, he said. Placing them on the bed, Ziri turned to face him. Nervous, are we really leaving? Michael nodded slowly. Tomorrow morning. Aisha was silent most of the day. She had helped complete the final brace design, shaping it perfectly to Ziri's form. The motors were lighter now, the support stronger. Ziri could walk across the training room without help. She could turn, she could balance, she had even run once. For 5 full steps before collapsing into laughter that evening, they ate dinner together. All 3 of them. It was simple food, vegetable broth and soft bread, but it tasted like celebration. Ziri watched Michael carefully, noticing the tired lines under his eyes. He had done so much, too much for her. Why? She asked softly. He looked at her, confused. Why did you do all this? Michael smiled, slow and tired. Because someone once helped me when I was just a scared kid. And now I help you. Ziri thought about that, one hand resting over her brace. I'll help someone too, she said one day. Michael reached across the table and gave her hand a light squeeze. I know you will. That night, Ziri couldn't sleep. Her thoughts kept spinning. The stars outside the window blinked like gentle eyes. She imagined Earth. She imagined strange skies, new people, and a place where she wouldn't be called cursed, but fear still whispered inside her. What if they laughed? What if she didn't belong there either? What if even humans didn't want her? She climbed out of bed, her brace giving a soft hum as she stood quietly. She walked to Michael's room and pushed the door open slightly. He was awake, sitting by the window with a datapad in his hand. Can't sleep? He asked. She shook her head. Are you scared? She asked back. Michael didn't answer right away. Then he nodded. Yeah. I'm scared too. Ziri tilted her head. You don't look scared. He smiled gently. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's what you do while you're scared. She walked over and sat beside him, resting her head on his arm together. They watched the stars in silence in the morning. Everything moved fast. Backpacks were loaded, medical files secured. Aisha handed Michael a sealed box. This has her updated biorecords. She said Earth authorities will need it. Ziri hugged Aisha tightly, her voice trembling. Thank you for giving me my legs. Aisha pulled back, smiling. No, Ziri. I gave you parts, but you gave yourself strength. As they walked toward the shuttle, Ziri moved slowly, not because of pain, but because she didn't want to forget anything. The soft wind, the silver dust, the smell of old wires. This place had given her a second life. Shuttle door opened with a soft hiss. Michael helped her inside, then took one final look at the moon. Behind them, he had arrived with nothing. Now, he was leaving with something more valuable than anything he'd ever known. Sarai sat by the window, her eyes wide as the engines roared and the shuttle lifted. She gripped the armrest tightly, but she didn't cry, she didn't tremble. She was leaving as someone who could walk midway through the journey. Michael received a message, encrypted urgent. He read it in silence, his expression turning serious. Ziri noticed. What is it? She asked. He turned the screen toward her. It was a video of her taking her first steps. Someone had uploaded it, someone had shared it. Now, millions were watching. Comments from humans and aliens flowed below the video. Words like brave, beautiful inspirations. Ziri stared at the screen. Unable to believe her own eyes, they're talking about me. She whispered. Michael nodded. You're not hidden anymore. Her hands shook as she reached for the screen. One comment said, if this child ever needs a home, I'll give her mine. For a long time, she couldn't speak. Then quietly, she said, I think I'm ready for Earth now. Michael placed a hand on her shoulder. You were always ready, you just didn't know it yet. The shuttle moved through the stars, carrying a girl who once crawled across a dusty floor, now walking toward a future that had finally noticed her. The sky above Earth was blue like melted crystal. Wide and endless. Ziri stared through the shuttle window, her mouth slightly open, breath held in awe. She had never seen this color before on her world. The sky was red and dusty, filled with storm clouds. This place looked like something from her dreams. As the shuttle landed, her hands tightened on the seat straps. Michael glanced at her and smiled. Welcome to Earth, he said softly. Ziri swallowed and whispered, it's beautiful. The medical colony was huge. White towers stood like trees made of glass. People moved fast. Doctors in white coats. Robots rolling with trays of medicine. Ziri kept close to Michael as they walked down the bright hallway. Each step she took with her brace made a soft hum. People looked at her, some with surprise, some with curiosity, but no one looked at her like she was cursed. Her new room was warm, full of sunlight, with green plants by the window. There was even a soft rug beneath her bed. She pressed her toes into it, smiling at the strange feeling. It was soft, like walking on clouds. Michael introduced her to the doctors there. They ran tests, asked questions, and scanned every part of her legs and spine, but they didn't treat her like a problem. They spoke gently, explained everything to her, and listened when she spoke. It felt strange, at first strange. But good days passed quickly. Therapy sessions began. Her new prosthetics were being built with advanced human tech, faster, lighter, smarter. While the doctors worked, Michael stayed nearby, watching every session. He never left her alone, never acted too busy. Ziri noticed his tired eyes, but he always smiled when she looked at him. One morning, during a rest break, she asked him, why don't you sleep more? He chuckled, because someone I care about is becoming a star. Ziri tilted her head. I'm not a star. Michael nodded. Not yet, but soon. He showed her the messages from people across the galaxy. More than 1 million now had seen her walking for the first time. Some had written songs about her, others painted pictures of her and sent them as gifts. One little girl, also born with no legs, said, I want to be brave like her. Ziri didn't know how to feel. She wasn't used to being seen, being praised. She looked at herself in the mirror that night and said quietly, they love me, and they don't even know me. But something inside her had changed. She stood straighter, smiled more, asked more questions. Her voice became stronger at night. When everything was quiet, she and Michael would sit by the window. He told her stories about his home in the mountains, about rivers and snow. She told him about the stars she used to draw on her floor with ash. One night, she looked at him and said, you saved me? Michael blinked, not expecting those words. You saved yourself. He replied, I just opened the door. Ziri shook her head. No, you didn't just open it. You carried me through it. Michael didn't speak after that. he just held her hand gently, and the silence between them felt warmer than any word a week later. Her new prosthetic legs were ready. They were silver and blue, smooth like water, shaped perfectly for her form. She stared at them for a long time before touching them. They didn't feel like a machine. They felt like a promise the first time she used them. The world changed. She stood taller, straighter, stronger. She took a step, then another. Then walked all the way across the therapy room without anyone holding her. Doctors clapped, the nurses cheered. Zairi just stood in the middle, blinking in shock. Then she looked at Michael. He had tears in his eyes again. He walked over slowly and pulled her into a hug. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the window, alone, thinking. When Michael walked in to check on her, she looked up and said something that made him freeze. "I love you," she said softly. Michael didn't move at first. Then he smiled gently and sat beside her. "I love you too, Zairi." Not as a child, not as a patient, but as someone who had become the reason he believed in hope again. The wind outside moved the leaves gently. Zairi leaned her head on his shoulder. No more words were needed, because in that moment, everything made sense. Her pain, her survival, her journey, it had all led to this. Not just walking, not just healing, but becoming someone who could love and be loved back. The crowd inside the Earth's rehabilitation hall stood silently as the doors slid open. Soft lights lit the path forward, and the stage glowed like a star resting on the ground. Zairi stepped into the light, wearing a silver dress and her polished, prosthetic legs. Each step echoed through the hall, not because of the sound, but because of the meaning behind it. She didn't walk like a child anymore. She walked like someone who had fought gravity itself, and won. People from all species sat in the audience. Humans, aliens, hybrids, everyone had come to see her. The girl who once crawled across a dusty village floor, now standing in front of the galaxy. Michael stood behind the curtain, watching her quietly. His hands were in his pockets, his heart beating harder than it ever had during any battlefield surgery. He remembered the fire, the dust, her tiny body barely breathing, and now she was glowing. Zairi turned to the microphone. She had practiced this moment, but when she opened her mouth, the words didn't come out the way she'd planned. They came out better. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she said softly. "When I was born, my people said I was broken. They said I would never stand, never walk, never be anything more. Then a burden they hid me." The room was silent. Not a single cough, not a single movement, but someone came for me. She continued. "He didn't know my name or my story. He just saw a child trapped in smoke, and he carried me out." Her voice trembled, but that wasn't the end. It was the beginning. "He didn't fix me. He didn't change me. He believed in me." People started to lean forward. Her voice grew stronger. "I walked, not because of magic, but because someone gave me the chance to try. I fell many times, and I cried even more, but each time I stood again. It was because he stood beside me." She turned her head and looked at Michael through the curtain. He was crying quietly, proudly. "I love him," she said, her voice like a whisper wrapped in stars, "because love isn't about blood or rules or names. It's about who stays when everyone else leaves." She stepped back as applause erupted, not loud at first, but then wave after wave of clapping. Cheers and calls filled the hall. Zairi stood frozen, then smiled, and for the first time, truly believed that she belonged. After the event, reporters gathered. Doctors from across systems approached families, asked for photos. Children hugged her legs, but through it all, she looked for only one face: Michael. He stood at the edge of the stage, hands in his pockets, waiting like always. She ran to him, not walked. Ran, threw her arms around him. "I did it," she whispered. He smiled. "You always could." Later that evening, they sat under a tree in the park just outside the hospital grounds. The stars were out again, just like they were on that first night he saved her. Zairi leaned against his side, quiet, thoughtful. "Do you think they'll forget me someday?" she asked. Michael shook his head. "No one forgets a flame that lights the dark." She closed her eyes. I want to help others, now kids like me, who think they're not enough. Michael turned to her, his voice low. Then do it. I'll help you. They started small. A little network of volunteers, prosthetic builders, counselors, and children who needed HFY, visited each one herself, held their hands, taught them how to move, not just their legs, but their hearts too, and soon she wasn't just the girl who walked again. She became a symbol, a movement, a reason. Some people still looked at her and saw an alien, some still whispered behind her back. But Zairi had learned something stronger than silence. She had learned to shine. Years passed. She grew taller, her voice deeper, her walk smoother. Michael got older, slower, but never once left her side. One morning, while watching the sun rise over the silver lake, Zairi said, "You know, I'd never had a real family." Michael smiled. "You do now." She nodded, her eyes warm. "Then promise me something." He raised an eyebrow. "Promise me that even when we're gone, someone else will carry what we started." He reached out and took her hand. "Only if you promise to keep leading until that day." She laughed. "Deal." That night, the galaxy didn't notice a star being born. It had already seen her rise, but it did feel the warmth of a girl who once believed she was nothing, now becoming everything she was always meant to be. Not broken, not cursed, but chosen and carried by her own will and by the human who never stopped believing in her.